Vienna, 1912. Just as the cathedral bells tolled noon across the Hofburg Palace gardens, Princess Philomena Odell stepped down from the carriage and knew she would not return. The hem of her dove-gray traveling coat brushed frost-laced gravel as she walked past the gate, head high, gloves buttoned tight. Behind her, the imperial crest still gleamed on the palace doors. In front of her, a single palace guard blocked the path to the train station. He did not move. "Step aside," she said, her voice sharper than the chill wind. Ziven Lachlan did not. His rifle rested against his shoulder, but his eyes, hazel, clear, unblinking, watched her like he'd been waiting for this moment. His posture was perfect, his uniform crisp, but tension ran through him like a drawn bowstring. "Your father's orders were clear, Your Highness," he said. "No one leaves until the engagement is signed." Philomena's lips pressed into a line. "It is not signed." He looked at her suitcase, then back at her. "Then I can't let you through." A silence settled between them, tense and crackling. Behind Ziven, the iron gates of the palace courtyard stood closed. Beyond them, the city shimmered gray and gold in early winter light. "I'm not going back," she said. "I won't marry Prince Albrecht. He smells like boiled cabbage and talks about rifles like they're poetry." Ziven blinked. It was the closest thing to a crack in his composure. "You know what happens if you leave without permission." "I'm not asking permission. I'm taking my life back." He stared at her suitcase. Then, quietly, he said, "Where would you go?" Philomena hesitated. "Budapest. I have a tutor there. A friend." Ziven's brows lifted slightly. "A friend. Not that kind," she said quickly. "He teaches languages. He's discreet. He'll help me get work. You're a Habsburg princess. You can't work." "I won't be one, not after today." His breath caught. For the first time, he lowered his rifle. "You're giving up the crown." "Yes. For freedom." Ziven stepped aside, just enough room for her to pass. She looked at him, surprised. He didn't meet her eyes. "Go then, before I change my mind." She stepped past him, her skirts brushing his coat. Then, softer than before, she said, "You could come with me." He inhaled, sharp and sudden. "I'm sworn. But not to me." Ziven looked at her. Really looked. "If I break my oath, I lose everything." "I already have." Their eyes locked. Then footsteps echoed from the courtyard, 2 more guards approaching. Ziven moved fast. He grabbed her wrist, pulled her behind the stone gate post. His body shielded hers as the other guards passed, not seeing them tucked in shadow. When the echo faded, she whispered, "Why did you do that?" He didn't answer, just handed her a folded scrap of paper. "Take this to the station. The porter there owes me a favor. He'll get you on the night train." Philomena took it. Their fingers touched barely. "I don't want a night train," she said. "I want you." Ziven stepped back. "Go. Now." She went. The train jolted forward just as the last light faded behind the hills. Philomena sat by the window in the second-class carriage, coat buttoned to her throat, scarf hiding her face. Her suitcase sat by her feet, her fingers tight around its handle. She had nothing left. No crown. No home. No name. Even her passport bore a false one, arranged by Ziven's contact. Pauline Ortman. But she had her life. Her will. Her choice. And she touched the paper in her coat pocket, a promise. Budapest was colder than she remembered. The tutor, Herr Coleman, lived in a narrow brick house near the Danube. He opened the door with a frown that turned to shock, then worry, then understanding. "You really did it." "I did." He stepped aside. "You'll need a place to stay. I'll earn my way." He nodded. "There's a girls' school nearby. They need someone who speaks French. I speak 6 languages. You always were impossible to ignore." 2 weeks passed. Philomena worked at the school by day and read by candlelight at night. She wore plain clothes, took her meals in silence, and tried not to look over her shoulder. But every morning, she checked the post. On the 15th day, she found it, a letter with no return address. Inside, a single sentence: "I vowed to protect you, not the palace." She pressed the paper to her lips. Ziven arrived in Budapest 1 week later. He wore civilian clothes, brown coat, black boots, cap low over his brow. His hazel eyes scanned the crowd outside the school gates until they found her. She stood beneath the bare sycamore tree, scarf tucked under her chin, books in her arms. She didn't run. She just whispered, "You came." "I had to." He stepped closer. "They struck my name from the rolls. I'm no longer Imperial Guard." She touched his arm. Then who are you now? He smiled, small and real. Yours. She dropped her books. He caught her in his arms. The next day, the school headmistress summoned her. You've brought trouble, the woman said sternly. There are rumors. A former palace guard following you. Whispers of your identity. I'll resign, Philomena said. It's not fair to involve the school. No, the headmistress replied. You'll marry him. Philomena blinked. What? You love him. He's already applied for a position here. Groundskeeper. Said he'd sleep in the shed if he had to. Philomena laughed sharp, wet, unbelieving. He said that. The headmistress nodded. And I believe him. That night, under the sycamore tree, she said the words. Ziven Lachlan, will you marry me? He stared at her. You're serious? I gave up my crown. You gave up your duty. Let's build something new. He kissed her then, right there in the cold. No music, no titles, no silk or gold. Just lips and breath and the warmth of a vow made real. Philomena never returned to Vienna. She became Pauline Lachlan, teacher, wife, mother. They had a son named Thorian, who could recite poetry by age 5 and built tiny boats from walnut shells. She never missed the palace. Because in a quiet house by the Danube, with muddy boots by the door and coffee on the stove, she had everything she wanted. And Ziven never once let go of her hand. The river had thawed early that year. By late March, the Danube moved with a quiet strength past the edge of the city, its banks still muddy from snowmelt. Pauline stood at the window of their kitchen, drying a chipped teacup with the hem of her apron. A low wind stirred the curtain lace, and she watched a barge drift slowly beyond the rooftops. Behind her, Ziven struck a match. You'll burn the beans, she said without turning. I like them strong, he replied, voice low and quiet with sleep. She smiled into the glass. You like them neglected. He came to her side, barefoot on the worn tile floor, and leaned in to look with her. They've reopened the bridge. Too soon, she murmured. The ice isn't gone from the mountains. The river will rise again. Still, he said, it's a sign of something. She folded the towel on the windowsill. Or nothing. Ziven reached over and touched the base of her spine, his palm warm through the muslin. You always expect the worst now. You forget where I was raised. He kissed her temple, then moved to pour the coffee, careful not to spill. The morning passed in quiet tasks. He mended a loose chair leg. She hemmed a sleeve for a girl at the school who'd torn her uniform. Outside, the sun broke through for the first time in days, and the scent of thawed earth crept in under the door. That afternoon, a knock came at the front gate. Ziven opened it with the old instinct of caution, one shoulder tense until he saw the man on the other side. He was thin, stooped, with one hand gloved and the other bare, and a leather satchel under his arm. Herr Lachlan. Ziven nodded once. I'm from the Austrian consulate. May I enter? Pauline heard the words from the kitchen and stepped out before Ziven could answer. No, she said. You may speak from there. The man cleared his throat. I come with a letter. It bears your family seal, madam. It was sent through diplomatic channels. She didn't move. It is not from your father, the man added. It's from your brother, Prince Benedict. Ziven glanced at her, but said nothing. Pauline stepped forward and took the letter from the man's outstretched hand. The seal had been cracked. She held it between two fingers like it might stain. Tell your superiors I received it. That is all. The man bowed slightly and left without protest. Inside, Ziven waited until the gate had shut to speak. You don't have to read it. I know. Still, she opened it. The ink was faded at the edges, as if the paper had passed through damp hands before reaching her. Benedict's script was unmistakable, tight, precise, almost mathematical. He did not beg her to return. He simply wrote of their mother's illness, of how the empire was fracturing in whispers behind polished doors, of how the court now referred to her only as the absent daughter. She folded the letter once, then again, and placed it inside the stove without a word. Ziven watched the paper curl and blacken. She's really ill? He asked. Yes. Will you go? No. He waited. She was never cruel, Pauline said. But she never stopped him. Ziven moved to her side and took her hand. Then we stay. That night, after Thorian had been put to bed, Pauline went out into the garden. The soil was soft at last, and she knelt by the roots of the pear tree they had planted the year before. With bare hands, she turned the earth and pressed in seeds she had saved through the winter blue cornflowers and sage. Ziven came out with a lantern and set it beside her. You should wear gloves. She shook her head. I need to feel the dirt. He crouched beside her, resting his forearms on his knees. You didn't ask me what I would have done if you had gone back. She looked over. I know what you would have done. He reached out and brushed the soil from her fingers. I would have followed you again, no matter where. She leaned forward and kissed the hollow beneath his jaw. They stayed out until the stars came out above the chimney tops, and the wind carried the scent of the river through the trees. In the weeks that followed, Pauline began sketching again. Not portraits or formal studies, those belonged to Vienna. She drew the market women's hands as they braided onions, the shape of laundry slung between windows, the curve of Thorian's cheek as he slept in the crook of her arm. Ziven made a frame from driftwood for her first piece. She hung it in the hallway without ceremony. One afternoon, she brought the sketchbook to the school and left it on the desk of a visiting inspector from Pest. He lingered over the pages longer than expected, then asked her to meet with the director of a small gallery near the university. She did not tell Ziven until after the meeting. He was in the shed, sharpening shears with a whetstone. They want to show my work, she said, leaning in the doorway. He looked up. They should. It's not the kind of art they hang in salons. It's yours. That's enough. She smiled. You always say the right thing. He stood and wiped his hands on his trousers. Only when it's true. Behind them, Thorian's laughter echoed from the garden, where he chased a paper kite Ziven had stitched together the week before. The string tangled in his fingers, and he fell in the grass without crying. Pauline stepped into the sun, and Ziven followed. They stood there, side by side, watching the boy run, the wind lifting the kite higher with each turn. The sky above them was pale and clean, like a page waiting for ink. By early May, the lilacs flushed purple in the courtyard behind the school, and the scent curled through the open windows of the classrooms and into the halls. Pauline added a final pencil line to a girl's profile and passed the sketch across the desk. The child studied it, then whispered, You made me look like someone worth painting. Pauline touched the girl's shoulder. You already were. Outside, the city-shifted street musicians tuned violins near the market square, and the baker's boy shouted the price of rye from his cart. The world turned as it always had, but within their modest brick house, something had shifted. Ziven had begun rising before dawn, not to tend the garden or sharpen tools, but to write. She'd found the pages tucked beneath his coat one morning in neat, careful account of his years in the guard. Not a soldier's memoir, but a record of quiet moments. The sound of boots in snow before sunrise, the weight of holding silence in a palace full of secrets. She didn't speak of it at first, but one Sunday, as he washed their son's muddy shirt in the basin, she laid the folded pages on the table beside him. You should let someone read them. Ziven wrung out the cloth and hung it on the line. They're not meant for anyone. They're beautiful. He didn't answer, but the next morning, he left a few pages on her desk wrapped in twine. She brought them to her Kalman, who had once edited pamphlets for the university press before the war in the Balkans had dried up commissions. He returned them 2 days later with a single comment. This voice he writes like he's never lied. Ziven said little when she told him. He simply nodded and went back to the shed. But the next week, he began rising earlier. Their son, now nearly 6, had taken to collecting stones from the riverbank. He kept them in a wooden box beneath his bed, smooth ones, white ones, a few speckled with rust. One evening, he brought Pauline a flat, dark piece shaped almost like a heart. I found it near the ferry, he said. It's lucky. She kept it on the windowsill above the sink. Ziven came in with a letter in his hand, his coat still damp from the mist. You're not going to want to read this, he said. Then why did you bring it? He held it up. Because it's from Prague. From the gallery. She dried her hands and took it. The director's handwriting was spare and slanted. They wanted to offer her a commission, a series of portraits tied to the city's upcoming centennial. It would mean travel. Weeks away. A chance to earn enough to buy the flat above the school, where light came in from 3 directions. She lowered the letter. I can't leave you and Thorian. Ziven leaned against the doorframe. We'll be fine. He needs someone to walk him to lessons. To keep him from hiding frogs in the pantry. I'll ask the widow next door. She likes frogs. Pauline laughed once through her nose. And you? What will you do? All right. I'll make soup. I'll miss you. She folded the letter into her apron. I haven't been away from him a single night. Ziven stepped forward and brushed a curl from her cheekbone. You didn't give up your name just to shrink inside a small life. She pressed her forehead to his. Promise me you'll keep him warm. That he eats something green. I'll teach him to make toast. That's green enough. She left 2 days later, carrying only her sketchbook, 3 pencils, and the stone from the windowsill. The train to Prague was crowded with traders and governesses, and an organ grinder who never stopped humming. She stared out the window, watching the landscape flatten into wide fields and then rise again into wooded hills. At night, she stayed in a boarding house where the beds creaked and the landlady served boiled potatoes with every meal. In the gallery's upper room, she met her first subject, an elderly glassblower whose hands trembled but who could still thread molten color into a globe. He spoke little, but when he did, it was with a reverence for light. Pauline sketched him with the same quiet respect she gave her son when he told her about birds. Each portrait took a day. She worked in silence, pausing only for tea and to stretch her wrists. By the end of the second week, she had filled 6 pages. The director offered her a second commission, then a third. She declined. When she returned to Budapest, the lilacs had given way to roses, and the air smelled of dust and sun-warmed stone. Ziven met her at the station, Thorian clinging to his hand, taller by half an inch and full of stories about a bread thief who'd been caught near the stables. Pauline knelt and kissed the top of her son's head. He smelled of ash and pears. Ziven touched her elbow. He didn't eat anything green. She laughed and kissed him, and he kissed her back like no one was watching. That evening, Thorian fell asleep curled between them, one hand clutching her braid, the other resting on Ziven's chest. Outside, the city hummed low and steady, a lullaby built from footsteps and street lamps and the soft clatter of dishes being stacked in kitchens. Pauline lay with her eyes open, listening to the rhythm of Ziven's breath. "I missed you," she whispered. "I know. I wasn't sure I'd still fit here." "You're not meant to fit," he said. "You're meant to grow." She turned toward him, their son between them, and rested her hand over his. "Then let's grow together." He nodded once, and they slept as the night deepened, the world beyond their door unchanged, but their place within it steady and sure. Rain fell in thin, slanted lines across the garden, tapping softly against the kitchen window pane. Pauline stood at the table, brushing flour from her fingers as she shaped dough into small rolls. The house was quiet, save for the low ticking of the clock above the hearth and the occasional creak of the floorboards upstairs where Thorian napped. Ziven leaned against the doorway, his coat damp and collar turned down. He had been at the old seminary building since before dawn, helping her Kalman repair the vestibule roof after last week's storm peeled away half the shingles. He removed his boots without a word, setting them neatly beside the stove before crossing to wash his hands. "I saw a soldier on the corner of Karoli Street," he said, drying his palms on a rag. "Not gendarmerie. Imperial colors." Pauline didn't lift her eyes. "There are always soldiers." This one asked for directions. In German. She pressed her thumb into the center of a roll. "And you gave them?" He studied her. "Only to the cathedral. I doubt he's looking for a schoolteacher. But if he is..." I watched him leave. He turned toward the river. She placed the tray on the stove, then leaned against the counter, arms folded. The lamplight caught the curve of her jaw, and Ziven could see the faint red mark where her scarf had pressed too tightly against her neck on the journey home from Prague. "I don't want to live looking over my shoulder, Ziven." "Then we won't." "It's not that simple." "No," he said. "But it's still true." She turned to face him fully. "What if Benedict sends someone not to persuade, but to retrieve?" Ziven's gaze didn't waver. "Then I won't let them cross the threshold." She didn't reply. Instead, she reached into the cupboard and withdrew a folded cloth-wrapped bundle. "I've been saving this," she said, unwrapping it to reveal a dark wool jacket, finely woven, with horn buttons and a stitched lining. "You'll need it if you keep volunteering with the city works. Your shirts won't last another season." He stepped closer. "You made this?" "From scraps. The tailor on Lognier Street let me use his press in the evenings." He ran a hand over the fabric. "It's better than anything I wore in the Guard." She raised her eyebrows. "That's not a high bar." He laughed quietly, and the sound filled the space between them like something lifted from a time before. Later that evening, after Thorian had been bathed and tucked into bed with his carved horse placed neatly beside his pillow, Pauline and Ziven sat on the back step beneath the overhang, watching the rain ease into drizzle. She held a mug of warm barley tea between her palms, and he leaned beside her, shoulder brushing hers. "I've been thinking," she said, not looking at him. About the warehouse near the station. The one with the broken shutters? It's for sale. He turned toward her. What would we do with a warehouse? Turn it into a workshop, she said. There's light and space. I could paint on canvas instead of paper. You could write without crouching in the shed. He was quiet for a long moment. You want to buy it? With the gallery commission and what we've saved from the school, we could afford it. Barely. And the rest? She tilted her head. We find ways. He took the mug from her hands and set it down beside them, then cupped her face in his palms, thumbs brushing the edge of her cheekbones. You never stop building. If I stop, she said, voice low, I'll lose what I left everything for. He kissed her, slow and sure, tasting the barley and the rain. Then let's build it, he said. Together. That night, they drafted a letter to the property agent, careful in their wording. They listed no titles, no past affiliations, only a shared intention, to breathe new life into what had been left to rot. By midsummer, the warehouse no longer smelled of damp wood and rusting nails. Pauline painted the walls in wide strokes of pale ochre, and Ziven cleared the broken crates. Thorian helped where he could, tying twined bundles of old ledgers and collecting the stray screws that scattered like seeds across the floorboards. On the first evening they spent there as a family, they brought a loaf of rye, a jar of plum preserve, and 3 tin cups. They sat on the floor beneath the high, dusty windows, eating with their hands. Pauline leaned back against Ziven's chest, her fingers stained with paint and plum. Do you miss it? She asked. He didn't ask what she meant. He was quiet for a time. Then, sometimes I miss the silence. That kind of silence you only find in wide halls and at the edge of parade grounds. But no, I don't miss it. She nodded and rested her head against him. I don't miss the crown, she said. But sometimes I miss the music. He gently tapped his fingers against her wrist, mimicking the slow rhythm of a waltz. Then dance here. She laughed. There's no floor. There's you. There's me. That's enough. And so, with bare feet and no music, she took his hand and let him lead her in slow steps across the uneven boards, their son watching and clapping until he fell asleep against a folded coat. The night deepened, and the city exhaled around them. Somewhere, a church bell rang once. Not a call to duty, nor a summons to court, but a simple marking of the hour. Inside the warehouse, beneath the steady rise and fall of their breath, Pauline and Ziven moved in quiet circles, the past behind them, and a future growing, line by line, brush by brush, beneath their own hands.